Today, I'm joined by Christopher Siu, composer, YouTuber, and one of the judges from the Spring 2025 Composing Competition. Today, we're going to listen to a selection of tracks that were not chosen as finalists and share some feedback. So, Chris, thanks for joining me for this.
Pleasure always. Thanks for having me.
Are you ready to just dive right in and hear
Let's
some
do
feedback?
it. Let's tear them
Okay,
apart. No.
so this is Searching for Life by Rick Medeiros. All right, thank you, Rick. I think for me, the my biggest problem with it is that it's too positive for the image. I think the image was, I know there are a lot of different interpretations, but there's definitely a dark side to it of some kind. Whether we've decided they're going to rescue a lost, teammate or they're under attack or something, but this felt a little more just exploratory and heroic in a way, I guess. So that's the main thing. It also I think was kind of a bit square in that it was like the form was just like very even and regular. And I think that made it just kind of feel very like, I don't want to say predictable because that's not exactly right, but just safe, I guess, in a way that I think in these competitions would do better with a little more of kind of some unexpected twists or turns, or at least some tension, I guess. And I wasn't really feeling a lot of that kind of tension, I guess. I don't know. Did you feel anything similar?
No, that's fair. I think the thing that stood out to me the most was actually more on the production side. So I was going to say how the first third of it, you can even see from the waveform, it seems pretty dynamically consistent. And then it's when you had those swells, those crescendos where you played around with the dynamics more. And I actually think the musical ideas are solid, actually. Like I think you have a good foundation there, a good base. I think it's just a matter of inputting more dynamics, more swell, more attacks into certain instruments, and then that will just make the whole thing sound more alive and more real at the same time. So I think just a combo of what Ryan was saying with the form, maybe playing around with more of the looseness of the structure, and then also maybe just taking a look at how you can make the instrumentation or the virtual side of things, the mock-up, even more lively, more dynamics. Maybe I found the low end, the mid-range a little dense. So maybe that is taking out some of the stuff there that's maybe clogging it up a little bit and making it a bit more breathable, giving it more room around in the spectrum. That could help too. But yeah, I would agree with the word square in some senses. So
Mm.
whatever that means to you.
Right. Okay.
But yes,
Cool. Well,
yes,
thank you, Rick. Shall we go to the next one?
let's do it.
All right. Next up, we have the entry. It doesn't have a title from Paul at Sydney. go first?
Nice. Sure. I mean, look, if there was an 11th spot, I would have put this in there, you know? I think it was really good. The only thing was maybe the very last section felt a tad heroic to me, maybe overly positive, but I think everything leading up to that, I was trying to remember the image, recall what it was like, and it seemed to fit really well for me. I guess if I had to really nitpick, it was around bars like 10 to 13 to 15 around there. You had those occasional jing, ding sounds coming in there. I didn't really find those necessary because I think I really like the atmospheric sense you were creating there. And then when you had that crescendo into the brass rips and all that stuff, I think that works really well. But that's just a tiny thing. I really like the sound design and everything that you did there, essentially. So yeah, that's just me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does fit the image. I also think that last section kind of stood out. It didn't quite feel like it belonged with everything else that was going on. Um, Maybe if there was like a video and something was happening that made that make sense, but there
Hmm.
isn't. It's just the image, so we kind of have to imagine like, well, what's happening now? Um, so that part stood out to me as like kind of like yeah, too bright and heroic and comic booky kind of. I do like the sound design. I thought it was it was a little bit too background for me
Mm.
for the context of this, where we're just listening to it. You know, it felt like it was kind of like missing a top layer a little bit. Not that you always have to have a tune, um, but just something to kind of lead me along, I guess, is what I was looking for. I don't know how
Mm.
else to put it, but yeah, that was
Cool.
cool. All right, thanks, Paul. Next, we have Alien Swamp from Arved Schulze. Cool.
Cool.
I really like this last section and kind of wish that was like the first section or the middle section, and that then we had like an epic ending to it or something. Like I felt like we spent a little too long kind of in this not really doing anything, and then this came in. I was like, oh, this is really cool, but then it was over. So, do you know what I mean? That this feels like it's kind of
Hmm.
like setting up the bed, and then the big theme comes in or
Hmm.
something, or even just even the big bah, 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 like like maybe move these to the end or something. Um, it just I felt like the form wasn't quite right. That it was kind of like that was a middle, and I wanted more.
Mm.
That's my main impression, I guess.
Yeah. No, this is a very cool piece. I like the variance you're putting in there. It kind of moves along and takes us on the journey, which is cool. I do think when you have those big percussion sections, I did think they were a little bit overwhelming just compared to the softer sections. And even the waveform, you can see it's a huge difference compared to the softer ones. Technically, I mean, usually if I'm like mastering a track, I try to have the absolute volume of everything relatively consistent, even if the musical dynamic within is changing, like piano to forte. I don't want, as a listener, to be kind of adjusting my volume as I listen to it, right? So that for me was just a little thing that I noticed. I guess the other thing was some of the instrumentation, like the woodwinds in there, and then the kind of uh, cool ding, ding, ding things near the end. It almost gave me a sort of Caribbean feel or like something in the woods almost. And I was like, does that really match, the image entirely? So I guess those are two of the little things that kind of stood out to me as I was listening to it. But I think the sound design overall was great. I think the composition itself has a lot of great ideas in there. For me, it's just a matter of controlling the dynamics, the balances just a little bit more and maybe trying an instrument or two different than what you already have. But it's there. I think it's pretty much there.
Next, we have Brano Miko, another big dynamic change.
Yes. Cool. Nice. I like the dynamics and stuff in there. It actually didn't catch me very off guard this time because I felt like I didn't really have to adjust my volumes very much, and it felt like the dynamics were more controlled, which is nice. Um, yeah, I guess the only two things that kind of poked out to me here were just before the big section, when you had the strings, the violins kind of leading into it. They felt a little MIDI-ish to me, so maybe that's just a matter of riding the mod wheel a little bit more, maybe inputting some more dynamic swell into the next section, having it start softer, and then as it grows, you really accentuate that dynamic. And then when you have these big anthemic notes, I think it was in the brass in this big section, I think you had the strings kind of uh, answering, like sort of a call and response sort of thing, or even just a regular counter melody. But I did want the counter melody to be more active because the melody notes are so not simple, but like it's weighted. Like there's a very emphasized feel to your melody there, and the notes are not moving super fast. So I kind of want that contrast of a maybe faster counter melody every now and then, like the occasional run or trill or something like, just a different texture to kind of keep us moving along. Or else if everything it kind of feels like that sustained texture, it starts to feel a little blocky. Um, and I guess at the very end, I guess we could play it again when Ryan shares, but something about it didn't feel quite as satisfying as I think it could be.
From here.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, maybe it's just like when you have that final crescendo up to the last chord. I think just before that crescendo happened, you had that C minor chord, that tonic chord coming in for a split second before the crescendo. I think you don't even need that split C minor chord or tonic chord there. Just immediately after those big chords, you start the swell right away into the final chord. And then on the very final hit, give it like a cymbal crash or something as well to accentuate the metallic nature of that crescendo. But I don't know, just small little nitpicks, but yeah, well done overall.
Yeah, I think it has a nice sci-fi sound. I agree with the blockiness a little bit. I think the kind of what it felt like is like the chromatic medians were are really great for
Mm,
the sci-fi sound, but also part of what they a feature, I guess, in one way is that they don't really have like progression, like in a like a 251 kind of progression. They're a little more static. So using at some point for me, it felt like it was just kind of like a sequence of interesting chords that didn't quite have a path, I guess, or I didn't quite have to like follow the through line of like, oh, this section led me here and now I'm being led here. So I wish there was a little more of a lead line, I guess, kind of taking me. Doesn't have to mean a melody line, but even just kind of harmonically destination to destination. I don't know if I'm being clear, but
mhm.
okay.
Yep.
Um, because that, like I said, the beauty of the chromatic medians is it can kind of keep you, you can hold people in one place, but then we end up being kind of held in one place for a really long time.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I think the overall vibe is cool for the image. That's good. Right.
cool.
Lilac Landing from Alex Doty. Cool.
Nice.
This one wasn't actually was an honorable mention, so it did
Ah,
make it farther through. Uh,
nice.
I think what I liked about it was the hybrid, kind of the like orchestral stuff mixed with the more electronic, the beat and everything. I don't know. I thought it was an interesting mix of all those things that I thought went really well with the image. I think my biggest desire or what I'm lacking is the it's like a three act piece but with only two acts. It's kind of like we have act one, we have act two, and then you just repeated it. Like you
Mm,
modulated it. A truck driver modulation just kind of played it again mostly. And I think that last third really needed to be like the finale or like the last third, you know? So that was my biggest kind of gap. Is like, ah, this I needed something newer. So, you know, like the destination again, I guess kind of like the storytelling. It was just like A, B, B prime.
mm,
I wanted ABC in this context, I think. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
That's
that's cool.
cool. No, I can see why this was an honorable mention. There's a really unique sound to it, and in a cool way, this actually works well with the image. I could see that. Um, I wonder if part of that gap maybe is, at least for me, the second B section near the end felt a little empty. And I think you had that sort of synth going on in the bass, which is cool. But in it, like aside from that, and you had the melody and you had the percussion, the drums, there wasn't that much going on in the mid range to really fill up the sonic spectrum and the harmonic information. So for me, I wanted to feel a deeper sense of body in the music. And I just felt a little gap there. I didn't mind the structure as much personally. I think it was just I just wanted more in the production side for the background to be really filled up to let that melody really stand strong on the top. Um, and maybe that's why I also felt the percussion was just a tad loud overall. It just seemed like it was kind of punching my ears, whereas the synth melody was kind of noticeably softer. So I think just a little balance tweak there could help it sound even more unified. But yeah, that's just a couple thoughts.
I agree. I meant to mention that too. I think the drums were a bit loud, especially the
Mm,
snare was a bit
right.
too present with everything else. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you, Alex.
Nice.
Okay, next we have Marooned on Tau 16 by Daniel McGoffrin. Hope I said that right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so glad we got to hear something like this.
Do you want me to
I,
read you the note that
well,
they've submitted?
well, I want to share some impressions and you can tell me how like close I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Because like as we were listening, your face was almost like there's something up with this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it came across, but there was this constant detuning of the pitches, which is very interesting. It was like you had like an automation curve that was like go slightly flat, slightly sharp, slightly flat, slightly sharp. And I think that added to the really like weird feeling and sort of unsteady feeling of this piece. Um, production wise though, I think and when I say weird, I don't mean it in a bad way. Like I think it actually could match the image quite well in terms of the context because it's like they're kind of unsure what's going to happen. It's suspenseful, etc. I think this piece could use a lot more reverb though. Just because the context of the image, it's like they're kind of in this big open expansive space, right? And then the spaceship is sailing on the very top in the sky. So it's like a big area. And I feel like a lot of these synths or the production overall was a bit on the drier side. So just to give us that sense of big space, I could definitely use more reverb. But yeah, I don't really remember a melody or a theme. I don't really remember any of the progressions or anything like that. I was just constantly listening to the quote unquote weirdness of the track. But I don't know if that feeds into any of the notes that you wanted to mention. So
Yeah, let me read
yeah,
comments from Daniel. Sorry. Marooned on Tau 16 is an attempt to create a cinematic soundtrack that is as alien as possible, given the image Alien Swamp uses inspiration. The piece's name alludes to the fact that the entire work is in 16 tone equal temperament, which is significantly different from the standard Western 12 tone chromatic scale, except for the four notes in common that form a diminished seventh chord. Despite this, harmonies reminiscent of major or minor keys, as in 12 tone, are also present.
cool.
So yeah, 16s. So I think that's really clever to think that an alien species like, 12 is kind of an arbitrary division, I guess, right? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
I know there's
yeah.
there's math and physics behind it, but why not 16? I could
Hmm.
understand that an alien culture deciding on a different temperament. I think that's really cool. I think and I understand kind of the form. We basically, a big crescendo and down again, which is it's a good, reliable form. It's kind of like an ABA. I think it was a little it relied a lot on the 16 tone
Mm,
gimmick. I don't want to say that feels like the wrong word, but like that was the main thing that I could just think about. Like you said, I wasn't like captivated by any specific melody or motive or like part. Like I can't remember any specific idea other than kind of the bending. So I think that was a really cool concept, but needed to be incorporated into I don't want to say maybe a more traditional package, but just something that was that also still had those other elements, I guess. Right.
mm,
If that
yeah,
makes sense. Um,
very cool
yeah,
though.
it's fun to listen to.
Nice.
All right. Thanks, Daniel. We have Thing 194, David Fought. Cool. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing to work on for this one would be production for me, especially the drum sounds just don't fit the world, I guess, is part of what it is. Like see the image and the planet and everything. I think the sounds need to be a little slicker. Probably like it's a polished. There's high tech. This is high tech, and the drums sound a little low tech, I guess. It also it just kind of ended for me. It didn't. I didn't really get like a satisfying ending. It felt like you just kind of decided to just stop there a little bit based on time or something. So, um, trying to figure out a bit more in the kind of storytelling way, kind of like beginning, middle, and end, and kind of guiding us through those different sections of the story would be really great. Because right now, I feel like we could probably shuffle things around a little bit and get a similar result, um, because the sections themselves are a little static, I guess. So it's not like, oh, this inevitably led to the B section, which inevitably led to the big climax or anything like that. It was just kind of a couple different ideas strung together a little bit.
Mm.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is the first track where we really heard use of hard panning.
Mm,
Very interesting. And you can even see it in the waveform too.
right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting choice. I'm just not sure it needed to be done in this case. Like I could just as well imagine hearing this track, but with the elements more up the center, and having everything work together instead of being so separated.
Mhm.
Because like this is not really like let's say an EDM track where you might make use of that a lot. Like especially a lot of those tracks, you have the hi-hats on one side only, for example. Um, but aside from that, I think a lot of the ideas are really cool. I was thinking, yeah, like it felt a little bit in no man's land in terms of style. Like I was thinking, okay, you have some cool sound design going on. I want to really lean into that more. Or like when the drums came in, I thought we were going to go into like a metal thing. And I'm like, oh, then why don't you throw in some guitar and I don't
Mhm.
know, electric stuff and really just lean into that. So it felt a little bit ambiguous in terms of style. I wasn't really sure what you wanted. So maybe that combined with the production thing that can really just elevate it because then you're almost committing more to the genres you're trying to, incorporate. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Okay.
good stuff.
All right. Next, we have Uncharted Territory from Otto Nilsson.
Cool. Yeah, I think this was really well put together, actually. I love the production. I think the musical ideas are very solid. This does feel like more of a background piece, though. Like there's the occasional soloist that kind of comes in, I think, with the oboe and the French horn. They really create some variants, which is nice, some melodic figures, but overall, this does feel like a more underscore vibe
Mhm.
type of track to me, which um, I think it could work. I just don't. Maybe the judges are also looking for some sort of thematic element that gives us something to hold on to, right? I'm personally, I don't mind either way. I think it just depends on what you're going for, but um, yeah, I really like the bass of this. It almost gave me a bit of the Star Wars vibes, just in some quiet moments. I was like, oh, I could feel like I'm sort of in space, but that didn't necessarily feel weird to me. It didn't really give me the sense of like aliens. And I was like, I feel like I'm in space, like I'm floating around, and it's like that sort of ethereal vibe, but I'm not really getting a sense of weirdness. So
Mhm.
maybe you could add in some sound design to make it feel more sci-fi in that regard. But I think in terms of just the underscore itself, I think it works well. But yeah, maybe just a couple additional elements could take it up another notch. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I agree. The image is, the planet is purple and there's that huge ominous ship on the top. So it needs that dark twist a little bit.
Mm,
Maybe it's a little light. This was another one that was an honorable mention. This made it pretty far through.
there you go.
I like this one a lot.
Yeah.
Um, I think the main thing for me is it feels like it's part of a 5 or 10 minute piece. Like it's very slow. It's like slow going, and I could imagine it then developing and having like contrasting sections and being part of like Holst's planets or something, like being a much bigger thing. And so what I would recommend everybody to do, and it's something I know that past winners do, is check out the other competitions and study the winners because the ones that tend to do well. Um, we're always like, wow, I can't believe that was only 90 seconds. Like it was just like it went by so fast. There was like it is more of a roller coaster. Not that it has to be super exciting, but just that kind of a lot more happens, I guess. And
Hmm.
so this was beautifully composed in the sense like it's not like, oh, it was too boring, but it was kind of, I think in the context, it doesn't it's just not as exciting in a live stream and doesn't quite get us going the same way as part of it.
Mm.
My only I guess complaint musically is the ending. Didn't do it for me. So let me put it. Maybe you should have just stopped there. I don't think
Yeah,
you needed
I didn't
to.
need this crescendo either.
Yeah, that the crescendo didn't quite make sense to me, so I probably would have
Right.
stopped there. But otherwise, I thought it was really nice.
Hmm.
I do think you should. It's not like obviously it doesn't really affect the music, but if you compare your waveform to most of the other ones, you can see how quiet it is. So just check your master level when you're outputting your track and trying to get that louder. So that because when we're going through, like we're listening through hundreds of tracks and you're just like super quiet and we're like cranking it up, it's a little bit of friction going kind of, and it just would be nice to have it
Hmm.
more matched. All right.
Cool.
Thank you, Otto. All right. This one's a little quieter too.
Yeah.
Next we have Don't Stir Up the Water. Tony Schondorfer. Tony Schondorfer.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Tony. This one made it through the first round
Mhm.
as well. So there, yeah, I think a lot of what I like that I think works well. I think it fits the image pretty well. Like it has that kind of darkness and alien quality to it. I think was really nice. I think the first half is too long. Like it kind of felt like it took until halfway through to get going. So this whole thing needed to be cut down a lot. Probably like half of this or even a third, like quite a bit more. Like have this just be like a little bit of an intro, then we come into this section, and then I probably could have used one more section
Mm,
after at the end, um, on top of it. That would be my main thing I'm looking for, I guess.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, th this one, um, I'm very involved with it as well. Like I feel like it ticks a lot of the right boxes. Really the only thing that kind of I picked up on was sometimes it felt like some of the samples sounded quite mono, and then they were like shifted to one side almost. I don't know. It could
And
just
that, yeah.
be the playback, but um, I think there were some panning choices where it was it felt slightly off, and it's difficult to pinpoint, but like maybe some of the strings were on like one side, much more biased to the left, and then there were responses on the right. Whereas I don't know. I feel like with this style of thing, the panning isn't quite as important. Whereas for standalone pieces of music without any visual prompts, you can take more advantage of that to tell more of a story or create some more separation or interest. But for this sort of thing, I didn't really need as much of that. Like I could have used more cohesion, I guess, overall with all the samples. Maybe some of them just felt slightly separated, I guess. Again, I'm not sure if that's entirely the playback, but it was mainly in the second half. So,
I
but
mean,
I
I
think,
think it's with
yeah,
orchestral instruments, we just expect a certain
yes,
sound, right, from them.
right,
So
exactly.
those
Yeah.
aren't necessarily the things to pan. It's more synths, guitars,
Hmm.
percussion stuff. It's a little more,
Right.
be a little more free, I
Yeah.
guess.
But yeah,
Cool. All
very
right.
nice.
Thanks, Tony. Last one.
All right.
We have Planet Exploration from Paul Garcia Sanchez.
Cool. Nice. I like that you lean into like the rocky metal sound there. Nice. Um, I guess what one thing I wanted to point out was when you have those big swells, like especially in the first half there, and then right after you kind of have a drop, right? But I think we can even appreciate the silence more. Like after that big first swell, I didn't even need that D minor chord there or that piano chord just to ring out for a moment. I could have just had it ring out for a second, like that crescendo,
Mhm.
and then start with that new section. Um, I don't necessarily think the slight crescendo into the second section worked. I could have just had it start at a nice mezzo forte or forte dynamic already. That's just a personal thing. So I kind of like the contrast of just a nice big swell and then let the reverb bring out for a second
Yeah.
or two, maybe a beat or two, and then, you know, commit to the new entrance. The other thing was in the middle section with the solo violin and stuff, just make sure it's on the beat. I think it was the delay was almost like a quarter of a second or something. So just make sure you're taking those notes and shifting them so they're on the beat. Sometimes we can make sure we don't quantize 100% to taste, but in this case, it felt like the solo string was kind of lagging behind deliberately. So just want to be careful about that. Um, but I no, I enjoyed the production overall. I liked how again the metal aspect got us into the groove. Um, Not sure if I necessarily associate this with the image though, but I liked the vibe of it though. It could definitely match if the travelers were holding guitars and stuff, I guess. But that's just me.
Right. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of cool stuff in here. I do like that a lot happens. It does feel like we've kind of get taken through a bunch of different sections. So does check that box for me, which is nice. My biggest compositional letdown, I guess, was the ending, as has been true with many of them. So pay attention. It just kind of stopped. I guess it was
Mm.
just like now you're out of time. I understand why but I needed a
Da.
I needed that last one, so you needed to borrow time from
The
somewhere else to
tonic.
make it happen.
Yeah.
It was, or if you want to end it with a feeling of suspense, you need to lean into that harder. I think maybe a bigger crescendo, maybe in this style, maybe like a riser, like a trailer riser kind of thing, or just some sort of swell or something that would make that more that kind of like driving up and stopping right at the edge of the cliff, and you're like, oh, like
Mhm.
that would work, but you need to lean into it then. Right now, it's a neither choice. It just stops. So one of those. I'll bet this was really hard to mix. I think
Mhm.
there's so many elements. I can imagine this session was a bit of a headache to work with. I do think I do wish the metal stuff hit a little harder. Let me I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, it might not work. I might have flipped the panning of your lead guitars are kind of panned out and your rhythm guitars in the middle. I might have flipped that so you have your rhythm guitars kind of out here.
Mm.
Use like a stereo or not a sample delay, so you get like this kind of like big, thick, huge guitar sound, and then your lead guitars are more just to make a bigger space. I think we could have had like an even bigger, harder um, thing with those guitars, but.
If
Yeah.
anyone is interested in a library that can do this sort of thing really well, Medusa from Musical Sampling is really good. So they have really heavy rock drums, and there's a whole bunch of sound design elements in there that are really, really playable, like pads or plucks or chucking guitars and cellos even
Hmm.
that you can just plug and play, and it's yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
Sounds very good. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. I haven't heard that one. That's cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you,
Another thing
Paul.
to make you vibe.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you everyone else
Yes.
for volunteering your tracks. We'll see you all again in the fall 2025 composing competition later this year.
Woo.
Thank you, Chris.
Of
Appreciate it.
course. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.